Hello, students. Today we will discuss session 3 of the essay on national culture by Franz Fanon. This essay begins with a statement: each generation must discover its mission. He makes a comparison of the struggle of the previous generation and that of the present. He says previous generations have resisted the agenda of colonialism and paved the way for current struggle. Because the present generation is in the heat of combat, they must not find fault with the silence or passiveness of the past generation. The past generation have fought their best with the weapons they had at that time. If their struggle could not create reverberations in the international arena, it was not because of a lack of heroism, but because the international situation was different at that time. The revolt of the present generation could reach this stage only because of several smaller revolts that the past generation fought. He talks about the impact of colonialism next. He says colonialism holds a people in its grip. It is not merely satisfied by controlling the people, it also impacts the native people by emptying their brain of all form and content. By a kind of perverted logic, it turns to the past of the oppressed people, distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. Colonialism, in Fanon's opinion, causes extremely serious psychoaffective mutilation. Colonized individuals are without any anchorage, without borders. They are colorless, stateless, rootless body of angels. Then Fanon considers the resources employed by colonialism to achieve cultural alienation among the native people. Colonizers usually convince the indigenous population that colonial rule will save them from darkness. The presence of the colonizers is absolutely necessary for the colonized people to lead a happy life. If at all colonizers were to leave, they would regress to barbarism, degradation, and bestiality. And he also talks about how colonialism has viewed the nigger. It always considered the nigger as savage. For colonialism, the vast country of Africa, the continent of Africa, was a den of savages infested with superstition, fanaticism, disdain to be despised, cursed by God. It was a land of cannibals, it was a land of niggers. So, he goes on further to discuss the tactics employed by colonialism. Now, after a long period of oppression, the natives are bound to rebel against the colonizers. So, Fanon tells us how the natives rebel against the colonizers and how the colonizers suppress this kind of uprising. The initial stage of national struggle would be diffused by the colonizers by offering employment opportunities or by creating some kind of a improvement in roads, in basic infrastructure, etc. But after some time, colonizers will realize that the social reform tactics do not yield any result. So, after realizing this, Colonialism will resort to establishment of a regime of terror by deploying the army, soldiers, policemen, etc. Now, the colonized intellectuals also realize that their past was not what the colonialism has been teaching them. It was a time of dignity, glory, and sobriety. Reclaiming the past triggers a change in the psycho-affective equilibrium of the colonized. He also talks about the concept of negritude in this essay. The concept of negritude was the affective antithesis of that insult which the white man had leveled at the rest of humanity. The bards of negritude will realize what worth their own culture has. They would contrast old Europe with young Africa, dull reason versus poetry, a stifling logic versus exuberant nature. Fanon traces the three stages in the works of colonized writers. The first stage, according to him, is the stage of assimilation, when the colonized intellectual starts imitating the works from Europe. His works correspond point by point with those of his metropolitan counterparts. The inspiration is European, and his works can be linked to a well defined trend in metropolitan literature. The second phase is what Fanon calls as the pre-combat literature. In this phase, the colonized writer is happy to remember the past. Old childhood memories will surface. Old legends will be reinterpreted on the basis of borrowed aesthetics. Sometimes it also has lot of humor and allegory. The third stage is what Fanon terms as the combat literature. In this stage, the colonized writer will turn into a galvanizer of the people. During this time, there will be many men and women who find themselves in different situations, such as being in prison, on the verge of being executed. So they find a need to proclaim their nation, to portray their people, and to become the spokespersons of new reality in action. So this stage is of combat literature is very important according to Fanon. He says, in order to secure hope and in order to take people into confidence, the writer must take part in action and commit himself, body and soul, to the national struggle. To fight for national culture, first of all, means fighting for the liberation of the nation. So, Fanon finds a relation between culture and nation. He says both are indispensable to each other. If one is there, the other is also there. National culture, according to Fanon, is the sum of all considerations, the outcome of tension, internal and external, to society as a whole and its multiple layers. In the colonial context, culture, when deprived of the twin supports of nation and the state, perishes and dies. National liberation and the resurrection of the state are the preconditions for the very existence of culture. The restoration of the nation must therefore give life to the most biological sense of the term, to national culture. National consciousness is capable of giving it international dimension. It is at the heart of national consciousness that international consciousness establishes itself and thrives. This dual emergence is a unique focus of all culture. So, according to Fanon, culture emerges only when there is a struggle for liberation. So, both of them are interconnected. National culture in underdeveloped countries lies at the heart of liberation struggle. So, whenever there is a struggle for liberation, the national culture will emerge automatically. So, after a century of colonial domination, culture becomes rigid in the extreme, congealed, and petrified. Colonial exploitation, poverty, and endemic famine increasingly force the colonized into open, organized rebellion. So, when they start to rebel, national culture emerges, according to Fanon. So, this is a summary of the essay on national culture. Thank you.